humanity is waking up in ways that they never have before, but the problem is that it's not happening fast enough relative to the things that we need to combat in order to remain awakened or remain having the ability to transcend ourselves. Now, what is Operation Monarch? It's an operation that can never really end. Not because they don't want it to end, but because technically speaking it can't. So I don't think people realize, and I myself probably don't even realize, the extent in which a lot of agencies and institutions go to in order to maintain balance in the world. But when I say balance, I'm not talking about the traditional institutions. I'm talking about the facilities, the institutions, the agencies, the companies that are working on things that we don't even know about. So, for example, I've been speaking lately about time travel in my last few episodes. Time travel, the ability to develop technology, the ability to brainwash people, the ability to do many things that, believe it or not, are necessary for the balance of humanity to be available and for us to be able to wake up in the world that we live in every day. I'm not saying what these institutions do are always good. I'm just saying that there needs to be a certain balance, and sometimes sacrifices need to be made in order for a balance to remain a balance, in order for there to be an even keel. So let's jump right into it because there's a lot to cover here. So first off, the reason why Operation Monarch can never truly end is because it falls in line with something called the grandfather paradox. Now, what is the grandfather paradox? The grandfather paradox is the proposal that, for example, and I'm putting up the picture right now as I speak if you're on YouTube, but if you're listening via audio, I'll explain it. The idea is this: you're born, you then create a time machine, you go into the past, you kill your grandfather, which means that if you did that, technically your father was never born, which means that if your father was never born, then you were not born, which means that because you were never born, you never created a time machine. And if you never created a time machine and you were never born, you can't technically go into the past. All right, so the fact that you still exist means that even though you killed your grandfather in one form or another, he's still alive. And then it repeats. Because he's alive, he has your father, and then your father has you, and then you're born, create a time machine, go into the past, repeat, repeat, repeat. This is why Operation Monarch can never end. Not only because it needs to be able to maintain balance in the world, but because at the same time, technically speaking, it's impossible. So, with that being said, let me explain a few different things because there's a lot to cover here. First off, the CIA has experimented, according to a gentleman by the name of Al Bialek. And this is according to newsintact.com. Al Bialek was born in 1927 and started working for the CIA and the military and all that. He then was put into some of the most top secret programs and was then doing everything from teleporting to what he claims to be interplanetary space travel to time traveling and you name it. Now, I don't want to get into the space travel part just yet because I want to talk about the implications and the serious things that he mentions that are starting to connect in real life now, believe it or not. So, according again to newsintact.com, and I quote, Al Bialek was born in 1927, or Bialek, and worked in some of the strangest and most controversial fringes of the U.S. military. He claims that the technical prowess or the powers of the United States is far more advanced than we could even imagine. He also offered details about psychological brainwashing done by the United States government. He also claimed, end quote, he also claims, by the way, that roughly 10 million Americans have suffered through some type of psychological brainwashing. And they don't even know it. And they may have health problems as a sort of residual effect. But ultimately, he said the reason why this brainwashing program occurred was because of the fact that they were using American citizens to act as soldiers or operatives or agents without them even knowing through the use of brainwashing. How was this technology made available to the government? You guessed it. The people that came from the heavens or the stars, these extraterrestrials. And so 10 million people compared to the population of the rest of the world, that might not seem like a lot, but trust me, it's a lot of people. And so what happens is that using brainwaves, electromagnetic frequencies, see how, and I've spoken about this before too, see how it all starts to connect? they were able to control people and brainwash people and make them do things and use them as sort of sleeper cells or sleeper agents, where a certain phrase would be spoken and then they'd suddenly snap into a sort of trance-like mind frame. They totally become robotic, totally neutral. They don't remember or forget who they are, but totally neutral about who they are. No emotions, and extremely robotic. And then suddenly they go and do what they're then telepathically told to do. So that's one part of it. Now, what's interesting here is Al-Bialek, which supposedly he claims is not even his real name, but he's been brainwashed to forget some things, is that he was supposedly one of the few survivors of both the Montauk Project, which I've done an episode on, as well as the Philadelphia Experiment. And both the Montauk Project and the Philadelphia Experiment are huge things, by the way, so this is not like anything new. He claims that, and I quote, again, according to newsandattack.com, Bialek claims that the mind control operations were exerted over him. After his memories begun to return, he was determined to share everything that he knew. He said he traveled to Mars on several occasions, as well as the year 100,000 BC to view a research station. He also suggested that there would be a terrible catastrophe in the next few decades which would change completely the landscape of the United States irrevocably. End quote. He's talking about like the territory of the U.S. And again, a probably similar example of that would be the film Total Recall, particularly the most recent one with Jessica Biel, Kate Beckinsale, and Colin Farrell, where humanity has not necessarily been wiped out, but a large part of the earth is non-livable or uninhabitable due to nuclear war. And so the landscape of things change. So there's like a certain percentage of Britain that's left, and then the rest of the world is kind of screwed, if I remember correctly. With that being said, the question then becomes, how does this tie into the grandfather paradox, and then how does this tie into the things I've been mentioning? So the grandfather paradox is something that's a never-ending cycle. So what happens when you get put into that cycle? There needs to be a constant balance. And this is what it seems like, according to Al-Bialek, is these intelligence agencies are doing. Whether it's for their own agenda or for the balance of humanity, I'm not sure. But one thing I want to mention is that people need to realize that the government and these institutions, as evil or unethical as they may sometimes be, they're not always out to get you, not always. And the reason why I say that, and I say that carefully, because for those who think that the government is trying to kill every single person in the world, I call personally, respectfully, I call malarkey, I call BS on that. And the reason for that is because they need regular people like you and I in order to continue doing what they're doing, or else without a population on the world with very few people left, what are you going to do? Now, I can believe that they kill people for population control, but to say that they want to wipe out the whole planet and they're after every single one of us individually, I would say probably more than likely not, for many reasons. Even if they had an evil, a negative or bad or evil-leaning agenda, it wouldn't really pan out so well for them. It would kind of backfire on them. Okay, so the idea behind Project Monarch is that they're utilizing many different things. So the grandfather paradox, the time travel, the teleportation. And again, teleportation is just from one place to another in the same dimension, same time frame, same whole thing, same reality. And then they're using these sleeper agents to carry out small, minute tasks. But here's the thing. When you have, according to Al-Bialek, 10 million people brainwashed without even knowing, 10 million people, each person doing a little task here, a little task there, and then snapping out of their trance and not even knowing what they did, it all adds up, which would explain why there's no irregularity in the way that we notice things when they say, for example, that there are underground bases being built, or there's something, experiments happening here or there, and people say, well, how come we never heard of it publicly? Well, because it may in fact be happening in public. It's being blended in to the rest of the society. So, for example, you have 330 million people in the U.S., give or take. 10 million of that 330 million is a lot, but it's not that much. It's enough to blend in and have these sleeper agents carry out these operations for you. They are then utilizing the grandfather paradox to do what they need to do, whether it's through teleportation or whether it's through time travel, to maintain a balance in the world or to push an agenda that will cause an unbalance. Because, listen, let's be honest with ourselves here. This may not always be the case. And it's true. It may not always be the situation. Things might change. Agendas might alternate. And it's because the universe is constantly recorrecting itself. But here's the thing. This is when I need you to hear me out. Assuming these extraterrestrials have shared this type of technology with us, or this type of knowledge, or both, knowledge and technology, there's no way in hell they would allow us to get close or even remotely close to the capabilities, resources, and knowledge that they have. So if they introduce to us this grandfather paradox, so to speak, they would introduce such a minute, granular, small, almost miniature-like scale of the grandfather paradox, where we are now going through a cycle in a clock. Pretend this is a clock. Let's just say this is a clock, but we think that this clock, utilizing the cycle of the grandfather paradox, is just this, when really it's just one number on a massive clock. And so what these beings who have introduced these intelligence agencies to this type of grandfather paradox is actually just a small piece of the big pie. And so when you can provide truth by covering it up with more lies, that's how you deceive people. And that is exactly the same type of method that another advanced civilization would probably propose to us or present to us. And we, as humans, would be in such shock of this capability, we wouldn't even think that there's something bigger than that out there, because we think this is all it is, ultimately. So it really presses the question of what is real, what is not real. How do you know if someone's brainwashed? How do you not know? Again, things like the Monarch project, the Philadelphia experiment, will provide us with examples of this, but ultimately, the vast scale of it we'll never know. I mean, you have things from secret space programs to med beds to all types of different things going on, and it seems like the more I try to crack the code into this and I edge a little further and a little bit closer, the more I start to realize that there are events in this world that probably could have been catastrophic to our species and to the whole planet that have been prevented for the sake of being able to live here and for the sake of being able to survive, that may not have been possible without the use of people like self-proclaimed Albielek, or people like Bob Lazar, or people like that who have the ability to come out and say, listen, I don't know I can't prove it substantially. You might call me crazy, you might not. But just consider what I'm saying here. Just hear me out for a minute. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to hear people out, and I'm trying to hear out what they're saying. And I hope you guys are watching partly because of that as well. You want to hear what's got to be said. With that being said, Albielek also claims, aside from the 10 million brainwashed, that in the next few decades there's going to be some type of massive event that's going to dramatically change the territory of the way the U.S. is laid out. I wouldn't rule it out. Now, whether or not that's used as a form of propaganda to enforce something, I'm not sure. But it seems to tie in with what other whistleblowers have said, which is that there's going to be a catastrophic event that occurs in the U.S. that is going to be staged, so to speak, which subscribes to the theory of Project Bluebeam, by the way, this sort of staged alien invasion or paranormal massive type of anomalistic event. And so that will be used to justify gaining and claiming massive territory across multiple planets in space. And you might think, whoa, how'd you go from that to that? Well, first off, let me explain quick. The government is pretty much saying to themselves, we're sacrificing a decent chunk of the country we live in right now in order to gain multiple, much more vast, resourceful, and valuable planets and territories in the long term. Assuming this event hits the U.S. over the next however many decades, like Albielek said. And so when you think about it, you're giving up a small piece of something to gain a much larger piece of the pie. And that's a deal that I think someone representing the United States would take in an instant, so to speak. And so when I say deal, I mean that it's probably the creation of this type of Project Bluebeam or propaganda-based event that is staged and is sort of an inside job, or a false flag operation, as they call it. And so you can kind of see how world events are coming together and creating a sort of open door for things that people are not seeing right now. And it's sort of allowing an open path into the next frontier, which is space. And I'm not trying to make all of it about space. I'm just saying that things like the Montauk Project, the Philadelphia Project, the Philadelphia Experiment, rather, and this brainwashing, this Project Monarch, with the utilization of the grandfather paradox, may in fact be a never-ending cycle that remains to keep the balance as I speak. So please let me know what you guys think. Please let me know if you think what Albayalek is saying is BS or not. Him personally, his whole, same thing as usual. His whole identity's been erased. His family's been erased. Everything's just been erased. So let me know what you guys think, because this is something to seriously look into and to investigate, because when you take a look and you see, wait a minute, it's not that hard to realize what the overall plan is with a lot of these things, which may be right, may be wrong, maybe a little bit correct, maybe some of it's true, maybe some of it's not, could be used as a form of disinformation. We have to consider all of these things. And so ultimately, I want you guys to make the decision, and please comment. I love to see when you guys comment and discuss your opinions, your thoughts, and what you think. So, and if you think, by the way, that I missed something, let me know, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you.